Okay, it's time to go. Debashish, do you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Okay, that's perfect. Perfect. So, okay, I guess that we are ready to go. Okay, so hello everyone and welcome to today's session. And I will be your host for the Happiness Path. My name is Tomasz Bogus from Scala C. I'm broadcasting from Gdańsk, Poland. And I would like to introduce our first today's presenter, Debashish Ghosh, a programmer with a passion for pure functional programming, loves to program in Scala and Haskell, a Seinfeld fanboy, ardent cricket buff, and loves to spend time with his beautiful family. Today's topic is algebraic thinking for evolution of pure functional domain models. The talk is scheduled for 45 minutes. After that, I will invite you for a special chat for Q&A session that will be held by Anastasia. So please, let's get started, Debashish.
Okay. Thanks, Thomas, for the nice introduction. Let me share my screen. So the topic of my talk will be algebraic thinking for evolution of pure functional domain modeling. So in this talk, I will be talking about thinking in terms of the algebra of types and how it scales towards evolution of the algebra of a domain model, which means we'll talk about the scalability of this algebraic technique and incrementally and organically. So when we are modeling a domain, the key idea is not to start thinking in terms of the implementation and the operational semantics of what the domain offers, but composition of functional forms in the setting of the domain. We will see what we mean by functional forms as we move forward. But let's start with some of the basics of what exactly we mean by algebraic thinking and how this entire idea originated. Though we are speaking for pure functional programming in 2021 today, this entire approach, before we take a look at the world of domain models, let's travel back in time, maybe 40 years or more. It was this gentleman who first introduced the idea of algebraic programming. And this gentleman talked about the drawbacks of statement-oriented programming and professed the idea of the algebra of programs in a functional setting. He got fed up with the standard imperative way the programmers were doing. And John Backus, this gentleman, got a Turing Award in 1977 and delivered this paper as his Turing Award lecture. In the shot, the highlights are mine, and you already can see that in the beginning of the paper, he talks about combining forms for composing programs, combining forms that use high-level program in a build to build still higher level ones. So he's already started talking about composition, function composition, and compositional forms. We will see how we can use it in the modern setting using a pure functional programming language, and we will see how it works. This is a snapshot of a part of his paper where he talks about the various semantics of programming, operational semantics as well as the applicative semantics. The various models of programming, the highlights are obviously mine, where he mentions that the programs that are based on operational semantics, we will define this term more clearly shortly, are conceptually not useful. They can work, but also can be bulky, complex, and may need to be mentally computed in order to get a clear understanding of the semantics. Here he defines the simple operational models as simple imperative programs, and the von Neumann models he mentions about, by which he means the standard today's imperative programming model. And if you look at the highlights, you will see that he states that programs can be moderately clear, but are not very useful conceptual. It's very difficult to conceptualize a program written in the imperative style. And that's exactly when he defines these applicative models. Charches lambda calculus, he talks about Curry's system of combinators. And he says that the semantics of such programs are based on reduction semantics. There are no mutable states. that we need to manage manually. Programs can be clear and conceptually useful. You don't need to compute the entire execution in your mind. That's what he wants to say here. Now, here's an example of an imperative program, the von Neumann model, as he says, for computing the inner product of two vectors. And this is a quote from his paper. It is dynamic and repetitive. One must mentally execute to understand it. And if you look at the steps, it's based on the actual operations that take place during execution. We are manually multiplying vectors. So it's definitely programming at a lower level of abstraction. And for this small program, maybe we can compute this thing manually, but very soon it goes out of bounds as we start writing bigger programs. And he follows it up with a functional definition using what he says, the compositional forms. Here he defines the inner product in the way we would like to think about it. It's a transpose, then you multiply, then you add. So the program is built out of composing the algebra of existing functional forms. These insert, apply to all, transpose, these he calls functional forms. And all these arguments boil down to the fact that using algebraic composition-based program development is more intuitive than using the operational semantics. Its structure, he says that its structure is helpful in understanding it without mentally executing it. We would like to think about this program the way we think about in our mind as to how to compute the inner product of vectors. This is one more quote from his paper, and this is the last one I will use. Here he talks about the ability to define the algebra of a program. He uses this term algebra. The algebra can be used to transform programs. He defines the algebra of the program in the programming language itself. He doesn't want to compute the algebra in the form of a separate logic language or something similar to that. He wants to have the algebra, he wants to have the capability of defining the algebra in terms of the programming language in which we are programming. Now let's get down to some of the basics. Now that we have seen that this algebraic techniques and algebraic thinking has been professed by one of the Turing Award winners way back in 1977. Let's try to define some of the basic stuff which we are going to see in course of this talk. What is algebra? Stated simply, an algebra is the study of algebraic structures, and the structure is defined by a carrier set or an underlying set. It needs to have some operations and some laws defined which controls the sanity of those data structures and operations. The essence of this definition is that an algebraic structure is completely generic. Example, we are not talking about any specific algebra. For example, we can define the algebra of sets like this. We can have a binary operation for some specific elements, and we will have some laws. We are talking about sets of type A. We define a set of objects. We call them of type A. We are not doing it for any specific concrete type like set of integers or set of longs or set of strings. We are keeping the type generic. And in the context of domain modeling, this set will be the set of data types. Here's one more definition, denotational semantics. Long back in 1971, Scott and Strachey came up with this idea of denotational semantics, where we treat the program elements as abstract mathematical objects, just like we would like to think of our programs as mathematical objects, and define some operations based on the mathematical properties of those objects. And the most important thing to keep in mind is that our thought process should be independent of the respective implementations. The important takeaway is that understanding programs through implementation independent semantics tends to be more intuitive in understanding of the program. When we bring in implementation, when we bring in the exact mode of execution, how the program will be executed, it becomes very difficult for us to keep the entire thing in mind. But thinking in terms of theorems, thinking in terms of operations, thinking in terms of the algebra makes it easier. We will see more examples of this as we move forward. And denotational thinking leads us to algebraic thinking. The other way of thinking this is the operational thinking. And when we talk about operational semantics, it's actually how the program is implemented, how we implement the program. And this is not something we would like to take into consideration when we think about composing our abstractions. When we think about composing a mathematical formula, say we have two functions f and g. F goes from a to b and g goes from b to c. So we can compose the two functions and get another function from a to c without considering any of the implementation of those functions. Okay, so let's consider an example from the standard library of Scala and consider the algebra of an option. An option is a data type which gives you the semantics of optionality. The first thing we would like to see here is that this option.apply and option.empty, these we call introduction forms of the algebra. What it does is they lift a value of type A into the context of an option. So it introduces the data type into the algebra of option. We call this introduction forms. And as we mentioned earlier, that every algebra, for every algebra, we have a carrier set or carrier type. Here the carrier type is A. It's completely generic. Next, we consider some combinators, a map and flat map. What they do, they allow us to write transformations on the data structure or algebra of option. We call them combinators. They are part of the algebra of the structure and allow you to build larger abstractions out of smaller ones. They allow you to compose abstractions. They allow you to compose abstractions to build larger abstractions. Next, we have the eliminator forms. They allow you to get out of the algebra. You are done composing your final algebra. You have composed a number of composed your necessary algebras, and now you would like to do some computation on them. So you are at the edge of your program. You want to get out of the algebra and get the value which it computed. So get or else is a typical example of an eliminator form, which allows you to get out of the operation of get out of the option algebra and deal with values. Next, we have the laws. Every algebra has some laws which maintains the sanity of the data structure, which maintains the sanity of the algebra. So for option, for example, in case of option, we have map and flat map that short circuits empty structure. So this is one of the laws which the algebra of option needs to honor. So holistically speaking, for every algebra, we have a carrier type of the algebra. We have the introduction forms, which allows you to lift the values into the context of the algebra. You have the combinators, you have the eliminator forms, and you have a set of laws which binds the sanity, which maintains the sanity of the algebra itself. And this entire thing, we call this entire thing the algebra of the structure, an algebraic structure. So just to reiterate, for an option, thinking in terms of the combinators like map, flat map, and fold is algebraic thinking. And of course, there are laws. And thinking in terms of concrete implementations, like say using pattern match with some and none, that's operational thinking. So in course of this talk, we'll see how algebraic thinking lets us compose data structures without considering any of the implementation part. and just by using the algebra of the types. Now, here's a module that has an algebra. It's a monoid. For a monoid, we have a 0, which is the identity, and the combine. The combine allows you to combine two A's and give you back an A. But there are some more to it, some laws that this algebra needs to honor. One of them is the identity. For example, if you combine 0 with anything, you get back the same element. And the associativity of combine needs to be associative. Now, some of these laws we cannot really enforce through the type system. So we need to have some laws, and we need to have test suites which tests for the validity of these laws for your abstraction. For example, we have these laws for a monoid. Now, here's an example of how we can use our algebraic thinking to implement a combinator. We have seen the algebra of a monoid, and here we see the algebra of a fold L. And we can use the algebra of fold L and monoid to implement a fold map, which is a larger abstraction, which is a combinator that does more. So what it does is it maps over the elements of FA using the function f, which goes from A to B, and then folds over the result elements using the combined function of the monoid. And that's exactly what the implementation of fold map does. So the implementation of fold map logically follows from the algebra of a monoid and the algebra of a fold L. So we have been able to compose a combinator solely based on the algebra of two other combinators, two other structures, two other algebraic structures. One of them is the fold L function, and the other is the algebra of the monoid. Now, here's a familiar combinator, MapReduce. We have seen MapReduce when we write our Hadoop-based systems or when we write streaming systems and things like that. But once we understand fold map, we can think of MapReduce just as a fold map. How can we do this? Because the algebras of MapReduce and fold map connect together nicely in our intuition. Because the types align. MapReduce has the same algebra as that of a fold map. So it's just a reuse at the cognitive level. And just in case anyone has implemented a MapReduce function using the standard imperative way of thinking how it works operationally, she should be able to appreciate the difference in the level of abstraction. The implementation of MapReduce once again becomes a composable abstraction if we think in terms of its constituent algebras. The algebras of a foldable, the algebras of monoid. So it's a complete MapReduce program abstracted as a functional form. A functional form is nothing but an abstraction over which you can compose with other functional forms. And the interesting part is that it's derived completely and intuitively from the algebras of a fold and the algebras of a monoid. So in summary, building and understanding higher order abstractions is much more intuitive using algebraic than operational thinking. And this also implies that algebraic thinking scales, because we have been able to scale algebraic thinking and develop some larger abstractions out of smaller ones. But what really makes an algebra? How do we know that we have built a good algebra? What are some of the recipes, healthy recipes for building an algebra? And here I will assume the setting is in a statically typed functional programming language. Now, the first property when we talk about an algebra is that it has to be polymorphic. It's never a concrete value. It's always something that generates values. And algebra is generative through application of types as parameters. Here we are talking about monoid A. It's completely generic. On the other hand, we are not talking about a monoid of integer or a monoid of string or anything like that. When we talk about an algebra, it has to be parameterized on its type. We call this parametric polymorphism. So an algebra needs to be parametrically polymorphic so that it can be instantiated for any type in the world. An algebra has to be lawful. Since we are defining algebra with a specific semantics, some of those semantics cannot be honored, cannot be enforced through the type system. So laws are for that purpose. As we saw that these are the laws of a monoid. So laws are something that maintains the sanity for our algebra. Now an algebra has to be compositional. We saw how we were able to compose the algebras of a monoid and the algebra of fold-L to build a larger algebra for fold map. So compositionality enables organic evolution of abstractions. We can incrementally build larger abstractions just by algebraic composition. So an algebra has to be compositional. Now this is an interesting property, restricted. Why exactly do we have this property? What do we exactly mean by restriction? If you consider the algebra of MapReduce, here we could have used the algebra of a list, right? Because we are folding a collection. But instead of list, we use the algebra of a foldable, because as part of MapReduce, all we are trying to do is a fold. And the foldable is just the least powerful abstraction that does it. With list, we have lots of other capabilities besides fold, and hence there's always a chance that the implementation will be error prone. The person implementing MapReduce can use some other functions of list as part of the implementation, which can make it error prone, and it can be more difficult to reason about. So we are using the least powerful abstraction that works. We are using the algebra of a foldable instead of the algebra of a list. And this is how algebraic thinking restricts you to using the most appropriate data structure, to use the most appropriate algebra for your composition. Okay, and algebra has to be implementation independent. We talked about this earlier. When we have two functions f and b, f goes from a to b and g goes from b to c. When we have two functions f and g, f going from a to b and g going from b to c, we should be able to reason that we can compose f and g algebraically to build a larger function h, which goes from a to c, without an iota of understanding of how f and g are implemented, as long as f and g are true to the types which they declare, true to the algebra which they declare. Now, an algebra has to be open. There can be many circumstances when we may need multiple interpretations for a single algebra. We will see an example later in the talk. For example, repository. We are considering here an algebra of a repository, which gives us the ability to interact with the database. We can do a query, but this algebra can be open. By saying that this algebra is open for interpretation, we say that we can have an interpreter of this algebra which does the entire operations in memory, or we can have an interpreter which uses a real database as the underlying implementation. So here's a good use case. Say for testing, we may like to use the in-memory implementation, while for the actual implementation, actual production usage, we would like to use the actual relational database. So we can have multiple interpreters for an algebra. So an algebra needs to be open for interpretation. Okay, so we have seen some of the properties of a healthy algebra. Now let's switch gears a bit and let's talk about what we mean by a domain model. This is the definition from Wikipedia, and I like this definition a lot since it highlights the defining aspect of what a domain model is, that it's related to the problem domain and how the artifacts interact there to produce the correct domain behaviors. So it has nothing to do with the solution architecture that we are developing. So when we talk about a domain model, it has everything to do with the problem domain, not the solution architecture. This is an important thing to keep in mind. These are some of the basic concepts of a domain model. A typical non-trivial domain model has multiple bounded contexts. Bounded contexts are fairly independent systems. And we talk about a domain model as being valid only within the confines of a single bounded context. So we develop a domain model for bounded context A, a separate one for B, and a separate one for C. A domain model is not a single monolithic structure. So it's these subsystems which compose the entire domain model. And so basically what we can say is, this is the definition of bounded context. I can skip over because it's mostly what I have said till now, that I said the domain model, bounded context has a consistent vocabulary and all these things. It has a set of domain behaviors and things like that. So what we can say is that a domain model can be considered as a union of multiple bounded contexts. A bounded context is considered to be a union of multiple modules. And every module is a bunch of functions, groups of related functions grouped together under a single module. So this is one way of defining a domain model. And as we just mentioned, that every bounded context has a domain algebra. So we can replace bounded context with domain algebra. And what we have is a domain model is a bunch of domain algebras. Okay, so let's do one thing. Let's start with a typical use case. Use case for a securities trading environment, and it's a very simplified use case. But what we will try to see is that how we can start from the use case, use the algebra of the domain, and how we can come up with a small domain model without considering any of the implementations of the algebra. We will later see how we define the interpreters of the algebra. But as far as composing the behaviors of the domain algebra to form larger behaviors, we will use the algebraic thinking only. So here's a client who places order in a flexible format to the ordering desk. And what happens is that order which the various clients will set or will place orders in various formats. And one of the things that we need to do is transform them into our internal domain model entity for orders and place the orders for execution in the market. And once they are executed, we get the trades. The trades are generated and trades are allocated to client accounts. This is the simple use case that we will consider for the rest of the talk. So we really have 3 steps in the use case towards the trade generation process. In order for a trade to be generated, we need to follow these 3 steps in sequence. So let's make our algebra reflect that we would like to have these domain behaviors. Orders, which takes a client order and transforms it into a list of our order entity. We have execute, which takes the list of orders that needs to be executed on a specific market, and we have the broker who will be executing, and we get back a list of executions. And then we allocate those executions to client accounts and generate a list of trades. Now, the first thing to note is that we have used the carrier type as M. This is the effect type. I will define what I mean by effect type later, but this is the effect type that parameterizes the trading algebra. This is the parameter to our algebra, the type that abstracts the effect of the computation. Because typically when orders will be generated or orders will be executed, it's not a simple kind of operation. It will need to interact with the database. There may be some exceptions. So all these things we need to take into account when we define the algebra of our domain model. So for the time being, let's assume that M is something which abstracts all those things. And we are intentionally making our algebra effectful so as to be realistic. we are saying that orders or execute or allocate, these are effectful behaviors. But we don't commit to any specific effect type. We are not saying that effect type is IO. We are keeping it abstract. We are being lazy. But we are being explicit about the fact that we need to have an effect, need to have an effectful computation in order to compute these algebraic behaviors. Now, one of the targets when we define an algebra is to be as complete as possible with the domain behaviors. We need to, as far as possible, we need to be able to abstract the domain semantics as part of the type of the algebra. So this we say the refinement, this step we can say as the refinement of the algebra, encoding some of the domain constraints through the type system. When we are generating orders, it has to be a non-empty list of orders. It cannot be an empty list. So that we are encoding as the type. And the result that we get out of this is that we get more checks during compilation, less code in runtime, less explicit tests to write by hand, because the compiler works for us. One of the joys of using static typing. So the compiler will ensure that the list returned will be a non-empty list. Okay, so what is an effect? Effects are an algebraic way of handling computational effects like non-determinism, exceptions, interactive input-output, side effects, continuations, etc. All those things which we tend to think as not being pure, which can be side effective. We abstract all those things in the form of an effect. We will see examples of these effects very shortly. These are some examples of effect types. Each of these operations represents a certain type of effect. For option, it encodes the effect of partiality. Either is disjunction. Reader gives us the ability to read from our environment. IO for side effects. Now, the important thing to understand here is that each of them is a pure value. Despite the fact that IO will interact with the environment, IO will do side effecty things, but IOA is not impure. IOA is a pure value. In functional programming, there's a difference between the what and the how part of it. The IO, when we say IOA, it's really the recipe of how to interact with the external world and do side effects. We are not doing the side effect. We are not performing the exact side effects until we submit our program to interact with the runtime system of Scala or Haskell. So IOA is a pure value. And this is one of the important takeaways from this talk, that effects, algebraic effects are pure values. Side effects are not. When we talk about reader EA, reader reads from the environment, but reader EA abstracts the recipe for it. Reader is just a value, just like reader EA is just a value like list A. And it encapsulates the recipe of how to do the reading from the external world. And there can be many more such effects. So, to summarize in a single slide, an effect consists of two parts. The one part is the answer that the effect computes, which is the A, and F is the additional stuff modeling the computation. F abstracts the computation itself. And see that there's a clear delineation between the result that the effect computes and the effect itself, the F. So here are some examples of side effects. Most of you should be familiar with all of these things. I'm not going into the details of these. Database writes, reading from files, interacting with external resource and things like that. But the important part is that side effects are an anti-pattern for modularity, because side effects don't compose. Pure values compose. Side effects don't compose. And repeat after me, effects are pure values. Algebraic effects are pure values. Algebraic effects compose. Now let's go back to our algebra of the trading module. we will now look at this in a bit more detail. We have made the effects explicit. We have said that all of these behaviors are effectful. So let's try to see how much we can proceed simply with this definition of these algebras. Now, here's an important thing. The effect type, I said earlier that we have not committed to any specific effect type. We have kept it opaque. M is an opaque type. We don't have any semantics or any denotation associated with M. We don't know exactly what M will do. But we have indicated that it's an abstract opaque type. And the denotation that we will give to M will depend upon the semantics of compositionality that we would like to have for our domain model behaviors. M will be determined by how we would like to compose the individual algebraic structures. We have 3 steps to the use case. We have defined 3 behaviors, and we know how to compose those behaviors. And depending on how we want to compose those behaviors, we will give a semantics of M. But that's at a later stage. Now, here's the fun part of it. We haven't yet defined what M will be. We haven't yet defined any of the implementations of the functions, orders, execute, or allocate. But we can write a complete program that generates the trade simply from the algebra itself. And as per the use case, we have said that those three steps need to compose sequentially. And the obvious interpretation for that, as far as M is concerned, will be to attach the semantics of a monad to M. Because monads, with monads, we can do a sequential chaining. So only with the knowledge that we need to compose the method sequentially in order to generate trades, the obvious choice of the effect type is monads. And that's only the monad part we are committing at this stage. We are not committing to any specific monad as well. And this enables us to implement the complete program to generate trade out of its composing smaller behaviors. It's a full example of algebraic composition, no implementation. So here we have been able to compose the algebra of a monad with the algebra of a domain model, or the domain algebra. Two other important things. That should stand out from the definition of our algebra. One is that we have said that algebras need to be parametrically polymorphic, and the trading module is polymorphic on M. But as I was mentioning before, we didn't commit to any specific type for M. We didn't commit to say IO upfront. Had we done that, we would have made decisions on behalf of the call site. The client, the user of this abstraction, is supposed to make that decision. We cannot do this upfront because this would be premature evaluation. And the second thing is that we only need to compose these algebras sequentially. Hence, the two combinators we need are pure, which will allow us to lift the value into the context of the abstraction, context of the effect, and flat map, because we want to compose them sequentially. So why should we use IO that adds to the surface area of the API? It's once again an example of using the least powerful abstraction, which is required. We don't need the capabilities of IO in order to write a program that will generate a trade from the component algebraic behaviors. So this is an example of how the proper choice of algebras can restrict your implementation space and encourages you to write less error-prone code, as we saw earlier. This is a real-world example of that instead of using the more powerful IO, we use the less powerful abstraction monad just to get the two combinators, pure and flat map, which should be enough to implement the program that generates the trades. Here's another example of an algebra. It does some accounting, but it's defined in the same way. We have the carrier type, it's effectful, and we have the same carrier type. Now, since we defined this algebra in the same type, in the same way as our trading module, it's just a simple addition to make our program do more than generating trades. Now our program can generate trade and do some accounting and do post balances. And we just need to add the algebra of the accounting. So note that this function generate trade and post balance, it takes a bunch of algebras as its input. We are not committing to any specific implementation, and it composes those algebras in the specific way that we need to implement our domain behavior. So here's an example of composing multiple domain algebras. Earlier we saw an example of how we can compose the algebra of monad into our algebra of the domain. This is an example where we can compose multiple domain algebras together if we define them the proper way at the upfront. Now here's the next part. We have just defined the algebra for the trading and accounting module. We haven't written any interpreter. And as we mentioned earlier, that an algebra needs to be kept open for interpretation. So we have intentionally kept the algebra open for interpretation because there will be use case where we will be needing multiple interpreters for the same algebra. And as I was mentioning, that testing is one such use case. For unit tests, we may want to use simpler data structures that uses in-memory elements. And we would like to have an actual database. When we talk about the production usage. Okay, here's a sample interpreter, a sketch of it. We could have gone for subtyping and implemented multiple interpreters as multiple subclasses of trading module. Instead, what we did is we decided to go the algebraic way, and we have decided to inject the algebras of repository as part of the interpreter. So this way, what we do is we inject the algebra of a repository which will implement the functionalities of database access. And when we talk about this repository, we can have multiple implementations for this repository, in-memory repository, or we can implement a repository using some libraries like Doobie, which actually interacts with an external database. So this is another way of algebraic thinking, that instead of committing to subtyping upfront, we are still keeping it open by injection of algebras. And when we finally instantiate our program, we will supply the actual implementations that it needs. So this will be the final thing, the final invocation of our function. And note here we have committed to the actual effect type, which is the IO. And till now we have kept the abstraction fairly open. And this is the code at the user level. The user will use this. She will define the implicits, and then she can commit to the specific type of implementation that she needs. She may not use IO. She may use some other concrete structures, like say Monix task. So this is one of the most important takeaways from this talk, that effects are not equal to side effects. And this is one interesting quote which I found very interesting. Rob Norris in a Scale by the Bay talk way back in 2017, he talked about this, that effects and side effects are not the same thing. Effects are good, side effects are bugs. Their lexical similarity is really unfortunate because people often conflate the two ideas. Indeed. So effect is good, side effects are not. That's an important takeaway from this talk. So summarizing, I will write down some of the takeaways from this takeaways of algebraic thinking. Algebra scales, as we saw, from one single data type to an entire bounded context. Algebras compose. We saw lots of examples of algebraic compositionality. Algebra lets you focus on the compositionality without any context of the implementation. Statically typed functional programming is programming with algebras, and we saw examples of that. Abstract early, interpret as late as possible. Keep your abstraction till as late as you can in the cycle of the development. And hello? Abstractions compose only when they are abstract and parametric. Modularity in the presence of side effects is a challenge, but algebraic effects are there for this in order to take care of this. Effectful algebras are pure values that can be composed based on the laws and honor the law of using the least powerful abstraction that works. Quite some time back, I wrote a book that discusses some of these aspects. It's sort of old now. Maybe we should think in terms of a second edition, but it discusses some of these aspects of pure functional programming. It has been 5 years since then.